Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
Okay, so you know how the Queen spent all of last year trying to make Sophie Wessex happen? It seems like she convinced at least one person.
The campaign to make Sophie Wessex the face of the royal family has allegedly borne fruit. According to a report in the Mail, Boris Johnson believed Sophie and Prince Edward could stop the Scottish independence movement in its tracks. And he even planned to send them to go live in Scotland and save the Union.
So according to the Mail, Number 10 officials were alarmed at the Scottish National Party surging in the polls amid growing calls for a new independence referendum. And so last year they dreamt up this plan where the Wessexes would be the public face of the royals in Scotland, and they would take up full-time residence at Holyrood Palace, which is the Queen's official residence in Scotland, and increase the number of royal engagements they had there.
This plan blew my fucking head off this morning. I'm just overjoyed by this story. I can already tell this is one of my favourite royal stories of the year.
It's so funny.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall when this was proposed.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're talking about how if Sophie and Edward lived in Scotland, they could increase the number of royal engagements there. You may remember the most recent royal engagement in Scotland was Prince William and Kate Middleton's train tour to Edinburgh, which went down like a fucking lead balloon.
Yeah.
And I guess part of the reason for this, because, you know, obviously we're like, what the fuck? Like, we've been listening to royal reporters saying Sophie Wessex is the secret weapon in the royal family ever since Meghan and Harry left. But I guess, like, part of the reasoning for this is that Edward and Sophie are known as the Earl and Countess of Forfar in Scotland. So, you know, like how they have different names when they're in Scotland for some reason. And when Prince Philip dies, according to the Sunday Times report like 5 years ago, Edward is going to become the next Duke of Edinburgh. And he is very involved in the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. That's like the only thing I know about him. But I guess, does that make some kind of sense? That goes some way to explaining why they thought Scotland, okay, Edward and Sophie.
Not to me. I mean, I think that's all, like, might be the case, but I feel like they were, like, which member of the royal family could we reasonably ask to move to Scotland? And they came up with Edward and Sophie.
This is fascinating, though, that there is even the suggestion that number 10 could make any member of the royal family move anywhere.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I suppose they see the royals as, like, you know, part of their job is to support the government in whatever it's kind of planning. So I guess maybe this, they feel, falls as part of that duty. But it's just so funny to think that the Wessexes have this kind of power.
And the Wessexes live in Bagshot Park, that outrageous mansion where they've lived since they got married in, like, 1999. So it would be a huge deal for them to move.
And they do have kids of school age as well.
Yes. But to get to the Scottish independence part of this, listeners may remember when the famously apolitical Queen decided to chime in on the Scottish independence referendum in 2014, and 4 days before the vote, she told a well-wisher that she hoped Scots would think very carefully about the future. And that was seen as having had some influence on what had been predicted to be a very tight race at that point. And the no side did ultimately win, but they won by 55%, which is still pretty tight.
Yeah, and we had talked before about when the former Prime Minister David Cameron was caught on camera talking about how the Queen purred down the line after he phoned her, when he was phoning her to tell her that Scotland had voted no. It's so horrible, that phrase.
Ugh. Purred? No.
He's fucking horrible. But now the polls are suggesting that the Scottish National Party is set to emerge with a majority in the May election. And Nicola Sturgeon has said that if that comes to pass, she'll push ahead with a second Indie ref, regardless of whether Westminster approves. And the Mail notes that 20 consecutive opinion polls have now shown that the Yes campaign is ahead.
Yeah, and Boris is obviously shitting himself about this.
Yeah.
This report in the Mail says that he has brought in one of his most trusted aides, this guy who was also part of the Brexit negotiating team, and now it's his job to take charge of the fight to save the union.
Because the Brexit negotiating team did such a good job.
But at the end of the Mail story, they say that a Downing Street source said no formal request had been made to the palace for Edward and Sophie to move to Scotland, and that Buckingham Palace said it was unaware of the proposal. So it didn't really go anywhere. But it's just an amazing idea in that I was completely amazed by it.
Yeah, I mean, have no doubt this is like such a stupid idea and is so condescending to Scottish people that they could be like totally fooled by these two goons going and living there.
It's absolutely hysterical to me that anybody in number 10 thinks that the relationship between the Scots and the royal family is such that this would have any kind of tangible impact on feelings about Scottish independence.
I know. I feel like a much better tack would be to keep the royals away from Scotland. Don't have a reminder of this like ridiculous, antiquated, oppressive structure that exists in the UK.
I did really enjoy reading the reaction online. The reporter at the Mail who tweeted this, the tweet had like 1,500 replies or something when I was looking at it earlier, and most of them were Scottish people being like, who is Prince Edward? I forgot we even had a Prince Edward until this story.
There's a comedian, Janie Godley, who said, yeah, that'll do it. Seeing Prince Edward rummaging about in the middle aisle of the Lidl in Maryhill looking for a bag of screen wipes is going to make me wrap myself in a Union flag and vote Tory.
It's just like patently absurd. And, you know, we're recording this a bit early, so I'm wondering if there will be some strong reaction from Scottish politicians, because, you know, this is just another sign of how absolutely out of touch number 10 is with general feeling on the ground in Scotland, to think that this would be an effective strategy.
I really don't think that Scottish people have the same kind of monarchist feelings that you get amongst people in England and perhaps Wales, although obviously Wales has its own like Republican sentiment as well. But just the fact that there have been independence referendums that have been tight, like now with Brexit and everything, the like urge to push away is so much stronger, and the idea that this old family could like play a role in uniting it is just, I think, patently ridiculous.
It's just mortifying, like this story for Boris.
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing, and it's embarrassing for the royals as well.
Yeah.
That they could be pawns in this ludicrous ploy.
Yeah. And like you say, like the meeting where this was proposed is just like something that's come straight out of like the thick of it or Veep or something. Like just these kind of gormless politicians. Like, what if we send Sophie Wessex? Would that work?
She handled Mr. Blobby and she can handle Scottish independence. There's nothing she can't do.
She allegedly handled Mr. Blobby.
Oh yes, go back and listen to our bonus episode, Who the Fuck is Sophie Wessex, for more on the Mr. Blobby mystery. But it did make me wonder if we are going to see more moves by the royal family to protect the union, to keep the United Kingdom united, if the Scottish independence talk ramps up again, which it almost certainly will.
Yeah. Like a couple of weeks ago, we saw Kate in full tartan and Will celebrating Burns Night by sending haggis to NHS workers in Scotland. And what I thought was very funny is that the National's report noted that aides declined to say whether William and Kate normally celebrated Burns Night. Just say that they do celebrate it. Like, this just really exposes it all as a stupid ploy to try and, you know, like you say, protect the union.
The other big royal story of the week is a lot less funny.
Yeah.
It is quite complicated, but basically this started with a report in The Sun last weekend, which reported that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had, quote, secretly erased Meghan's first names from Archie's birth papers.
So Rachel Meghan was taken out to leave just Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. And also Harry added Prince to his title, which now reads His Royal Highness Prince Henry Charles Albert David Duke of Sussex.
Fucking hell.
A snappy title.
This change was made a month after Archie was born, so it's not like a recent thing. It happened 2 years ago. And The Sun says, the unprecedented move could be seen as a snub to the Cambridges, who have included Kate's names on her children's certificates. It may also be viewed as Harry aligning his wife with Mum Di, who always used Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales. Bizarre.
Yeah, like, bringing the Cambridges into it I was gobsmacked. I was like, this seems like such a reach.
I was like, how could this be seen as a snub to the Cambridges? The piece in The Sun was pretty short anyway, but jumping to that paragraph without giving any explanation why was very startling. And the report also notes that it was Lady Colin Campbell, the author who wrote a biography of Harry and Meghan last year and has said some wacky and wild things about the royals, particularly about Prince Andrew. And The Sun said that it was her who spotted the amendment, and we can only presume called The Sun up to let them know.
Ingrid Seward, who's the editor of Majesty magazine, had this to say. She said, perhaps this is another sign they were desperate to do something different to the Cambridges. Is it? What?
I am so confused about all this. And The Sun noted that it had approached the Sussexes about this story before they published, but that Harry and Meghan had refused to comment, though they did later release a statement to the royal reporter and the author of Finding Freedom, Omid Scobie.
The spokesperson said, the change of name on public documents in 2019 was dictated by the palace, as confirmed by documents from senior palace officials. This was not requested by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, nor by the Duke of Sussex. To see this UK tabloid and their carnival of so-called experts chose to deceptively whip this into a calculated family snub and suggest that she would oddly want to be nameless on her child's birth certificate or any other legal document would be laughable if it were not offensive. There is a lot going on in the world. Let's focus on that rather than creating clickbait.
Very, very strongly worded.
Yeah. Pulling no punches. But it is odd that they couldn't have just, like, issued this kind of statement to The Sun in the first place to cut this off at the source.
Yeah, that's what I don't get. And I'm sure Sussex stands will shout at us. But, like, I know that Harry and Meghan have said they won't cooperate with the tabloids, but they did say that their team would be able to fact-check things.
Yeah.
And surely this would be a very clear case of them saying, no, this is false. The same way that they used to do at Kensington Palace.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for the story to be published and then releasing this furious statement that turns it into a much bigger story.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it would have helped them more than it would have helped The Sun to respond to them, right? You know, it wouldn't necessarily be playing into The Sun's hands, which I guess is what they want to avoid doing with these kind of statements.
It's clearly a matter of principle for them, though.
Yeah.
I do think the key word in this Sussex statement is dictated, when they said that the change of name was dictated by the palace. And that word choice really got the palace's hackles up. Big time.
Yeah, they really didn't like that. And there was an exclusive in Page 6, which is another Rupert Murdoch paper, if you're keeping track of that. They had quotes from well-placed sources who said, this is totally baffling. The palace did not dictate anything. This amendment was made by staff within their former office at Kensington Palace, and higher-ups at Buckingham Palace were always kept in the loop.
Page 6 notes, though, the Sussexes, however, did not request the change, we are told. It is believed to have been carried out by their former staff. So this just complicates things even further.
Yeah, who made the edits?
And then there was a big piece in the Mail by the royal reporter Rebecca English, who kind of recaps things with some more details Although she does note, quite nastily I thought, that removing Meghan's names from the birth certificate was just a trivial change that had been blown up into a toxic row. And that to me seemed like you've got to be pretty seriously old-fashioned to think not having a woman's name on her child's birth certificate is, as she puts it, a small difference, surely.
I know, it seems like a viewpoint from another time.
That to me is a major fucking difference.
Yeah.
Especially having it erased after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as well as that, you know, I do think there is a pretty ugly racist implication to this kind of change, particularly the issue of erasing the names of the first non-white woman in the royal family, leaving only her royal titles, which are themselves a relic of colonial rule.
I know, and especially, I mean, I don't know if this was the case at the time, but, you know, in the years since, we've seen so many calls for them not to have those titles anymore anyway. So literally nothing of that name that's on the birth certificate would be left. It's bullshit.
And it just feels like gaslighting to me or something, to be like, why is this woman making such a big deal about not having her names on her child's birth certificate?
As though that's a tiny thing. It's incredible reasoning. Just don't get it.
Anyway, Rebecca English reports, Buckingham Palace suggested on Sunday, this is Sunday of last week, in comments clearly discussed in advance of the Sussexes, that a clerical error had precipitated the need to formally change the birth certificate. And she notes that the handling of Archie's birth certificate was led by Samantha Cohen, a woman who worked for the Queen for 17 years before moving to Kensington Palace. And apparently this woman knows the intricacies of royal protocol inside out and is not someone given to making significant errors, clerical or otherwise. Nor, for that matter, are the team at Westminster Registry Office, who are well versed in recording royal births.
So now we think it wasn't just an innocent mistake, it was something done on purpose.
And even curiouser is the line that the Sussexes clearly believe they have hard evidence to support the suggestion that the palace dictated to them, although this remains confidential as it would involve internal communications.
Which obviously they would not want to make public. But she quotes a source who says, the language used suggesting it was the palace who dictated the wording is somewhat unfortunate. The decision to issue a statement and the wording of it poses more questions than it answers, unfortunately. Hinting then at some frustration on the palace's side.
Yeah, definitely. It does make me wonder, though, like, what are the palace responding to here? Because the Mail piece suggests that Meghan's team had leaked to Page 6 to add to the earlier statement about the palace's dictation. But, you know, that raises the question of, would the Sussexes cooperate with a Murdoch-owned tabloid, as Prince Harry might put it? And if it wasn't them, then who was it? Like, is this a question of Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace leaking to different places, saying different things? Why can't they get the story straight? Part of the suggestion in the quotes from the palace's side were that something had been lost in translation with Meghan's new American team that they wouldn't understand, and that they were talking about royal protocol, and Rebecca English is saying that there is no set protocol with birth records. This is just fucking royal protocol for every other thing, obviously.
Rebecca English also said that instead it was suggested, clearly after consultation with the Sussexes office, that the changes were made by staff to bring Archie's birth certificate in line with other private documents such as Meghan's passport. Does that mean she's taken her name off her passport?
Even though she said in her statement she wouldn't want to remain nameless on any legal document. I mean, maybe this is just getting very boring now for people, but it became this huge drama, and I don't think we'll ever really find out, but it is further indication that things are still very frosty between the Sussexes and the palace.
Yeah, definitely. But in other Sussex news this week, Harry accepted an apology and substantial damages from the Mail on Sunday's publisher over claims that he snubbed the Royal Marines after stepping down as a senior royal, and he's donating the money he got to the Invictus Games Foundation.
I think we might have talked about this before, but he sued Associated Newspapers, that's the publisher of the Mail on Sunday and Mail Online, for libel over two, quote, almost identical articles published in October, which included the headline, "Top General Accuses Harry of Turning His Back on the Royal Marines," and claimed that Harry had not been in touch since his last appearance as an honorary Marine in March.
The Telegraph reports that Harry made a rare personal statement in the High Court in which he took aim at the Mail on Sunday, accusing the newspaper of making a personal attack on his character. So although Harry agreed to both the wording and the prominence of the newspaper's apology before it was published, he used this statement to criticise both, claiming it significantly underplayed the seriousness of the accusations and failed to expressly acknowledge the allegations were false.
And he was actually warned by the judge not to use the court as a platform for collateral attacks, with the judge describing Harry's original draft statement as unduly tendentious, which I looked up. I wasn't sure what the definition was, but it basically means to be biased or prejudiced. And the judge revealed that Harry's original statement had included criticisms of the newspaper that had to be removed or amended. There was a line in a separate Telegraph reporter, Camilla Tominey, in her newsletter where I rarely agree, where I don't often agree with her, but she wrote, "While the public will have sympathy with the Prince wanting to correct a story wrongly claiming he had turned his back on the Royal Marines, few would support him using the British legal system as his own personal soapbox, not least when he doesn't even live in the UK anymore."
She has got a point. I mean, more than anything, it's very uncool. Like, he won, and then his, final statement on the matter had to be toned down by the judge, and kind of came across like it was possibly a bit of a tantrum letter.
I know, and it means that, the coverage of this story isn't just about Harry's win. It's about Harry getting slapped down by a judge for having a sort of hissy fit after already agreeing to the statement from the Mail on Sunday's publisher.
I think we can all understand Harry's anger. It's very well documented at this point, but just be a bit cooler. Maybe have someone on your team who deals with organising, managing all of these things so that you can take a step back and maybe not have to frankly waste a lot of energy getting angry about stuff that you've already won.
People magazine's report pointed out that Harry's lawyer, Jenny Afia, also told the court that Associated Newspapers had reneged on a previous agreement to donate money to charity at the same time as publishing the apology for the misleading articles. She said, "Unsurprisingly, the Mail again misled their readers in December by claiming to make a charitable donation as part of an initial apology. They did no such thing. The Duke is personally donating the significant damages recovered from this legal resolution to the Invictus Games Foundation." And the Telegraph reports that the judge's costs order revealed Harry's lawyer's fees were a manifestly disproportionate £35,000 simply for the application, prompting the judge to state that no litigant of ordinary means would reasonably consider spending such a sum on this exercise. And he concluded that the newspaper should pay £2,500 towards Harry's costs, meaning that the outstanding £32,500 bill will have to be met by Harry personally. So it is a win for Harry, but it's a fucking expensive win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's doing fine for cash.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm sure he'd have liked to have the full thing covered. It does kind of serve as a reminder of how much money you need to have to go up against a newspaper. It's so expensive. But while Harry was making his statement in court, Will decided to make his on Twitter.
Prince William took to Twitter to tweet about racism. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. We got a little thread.
A hat trick, to use football terminology.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah.
You were saying football things in a football voice. How do you know about football things?
Okay, here's the first shot.
Racist abuse, whether on the pitch, in the stands, or on social media, is despicable and it must stop now.
And then he bends the ball.
With We all have a responsibility to create an environment where such abuse is not tolerated, and those who choose to spread hate and division are held accountable for their actions. That responsibility extends to the platforms where so much of this activity now takes place.
And then he goes wide.
With a final header. I commend all those players, supporters, clubs and organisations who continue to call out and condemn this abuse in the strongest terms. W.
Clearly we know loads about football.
Yeah, from this very natural football jargon that we're dropping in.
This isn't really very funny though.
No, I mean, this is too little too late, once again, with Will on the topic of racism.
I guess I would consider this rather unsportsmanlike conduct, Tom.
Yeah?
From Will. Because when I was reading this, I was, like many people, struck by how tone deaf it sounded, that there was obviously someone helping him write this and nobody thought of the other context that this might be read in. All his talk about responsibility and condemning abuse in the strongest terms, calling out abuse in the strongest terms, talk of hate and division, holding people accountable.
It's all so, just feels so hypocritical, doesn't it? Coming from this man after the events of the last 2 years regarding Harry and Meghan. Specifically the abuse Meghan suffered.
Yeah, I think when the institution that you are the face of has been so marked by a very public campaign of racist harassment for one of its members, that to make statements like this seems completely crass and utterly lacking in any kind of self-awareness or reflection. And it's one thing to want to speak out about this, which is commendable and which he should be doing.
Yeah.
But to do so in this way is farcical, honestly. Yeah. And, you know, I don't really know how he should do this. Because, like you were saying, it's too little too late. He can't hop in and say, oh yeah, I thought the environment that persisted, that allowed such racist abuse of my sister-in-law was despicable, and now I'm going to talk about the Premier League. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't follow. But I think his own actions over the last few years mean that he is in a very weak place when it comes to talking about any stuff like this. And I have to think that a lot of the black players in the Premier League, this won't have gone over their heads, the treatment of Meghan.
Of course, absolutely not. And to have Will talking about this stuff, and I don't know, it seems like he's trying to almost get himself off the hook by only wanting to talk about racism within football. It seems like he's trying to protect himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, aside from the Meghan of everything, it's really glaring how little they did during the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement last summer. The fucking radio silence from Kensington Palace. And now he deigns to tweet about this when previously he, you know, infamously said that he was bored of racism in football, that he was fed up with it. This quote from a source is interesting. This is in the Mirror. The source said, "The Duke said he was absolutely outraged at the abuse. He said enough is enough and promised to do all he can in his role as president of the FA and beyond to stamp such vile behaviour out. William believes there needs to be more cohesion from the FA, the clubs and big tech companies to have as strong a stance as possible to end such hate." And this is just plainly absurd to me, that a man with his record... How is this plausible that anybody could believe he will actually do anything to stamp out behaviour like this? You know, this is a man whose own social media accounts are still filled with some blatant and some dog whistle racist comments about Meghan. You know, there are monkey emojis, all kinds of stuff appears in his own fucking Instagram comments.
Yeah.
And they can't even crack down on that. And he thinks he can take on racism in football when he hasn't even got his own fucking social media accounts in order.
I know. I mean, this comes because in addition to the tweets, he called an emergency meeting, right, with football figureheads and campaigners, apparently to devise plans on how a multi-agency partnership can work together to stamp out racism in football. And that all sounds very impressive, but it's accompanied, again, with sources in the Mirror who say that William is looking to speak to formulate his plans before the end of the current season. So it's just more of this classic Cambridge future speak of like, I look forward to intending to announcing my plans for what I might do at some point in the near future or possibly the distant future. And it's like a masterclass almost in appearing to look busy this week from Will. I did think it was kind of interesting, though, that he's talking about big tech. And Harry is also interested in how you monitor hate speech online or in online communities and looking at these kind of tech companies to take responsibility for what people are saying and how people are coming across these kind of comments. But we really didn't get the same, like, woke Prince Will treatment that we tend to get whenever Harry talks about social justice issues or issues of hate speech online, particularly when he's talking about stuff that affects his own wife, you know, stuff that he has close to first-hand experience in a way that Will absolutely doesn't. So yeah, I just think this all plays into Will's, like, limiting himself into this football world in order to cling on to this blokey image that he seems to love so much of, like, I'm just a bloke who hangs around with footballers and I'm one of the lads.
It's so horrible.
It's a red card from us, Will. Get off the pitch. And let's talk about Kate. She's not been wearing football boots, but she has been wearing her Mum of the Nation hat this week.
Oh, this hat! This bobble beanie. Kate, before she put on the bobble beanie, she had to do a Zoom with teachers from the Ribbon Academy in County Durham in her role as patron of Place to Be, which is a charity that provides counselling for children. It was Children's Mental Health Awareness Week, and on the Zoom call, everyone was asked for one word to describe parenting in the pandemic, and Kate revealed that she was exhausted. Her word was exhausted, and she went on to say that she was exhausted from homeschooling and being a lockdown hairdresser for her kids, among the myriad other roles she says she's had to take on.
And that she would normally expect, you know, somebody else to be doing, which I thought was so funny. And I wasn't the only one. Emily Andrews, who's a royal reporter for the Mail on Sunday, tweeted, Kate comes across as relatable and thoughtful, and she's doing homeschool. But make no mistake, she has plenty of staff up there, including a nanny, housekeepers to clean and cook, gardeners, personal protection officers to run errands, office staff to organise her work. Another mansion for an office/escape for the kids. So true. It's like what we were talking about last episode about being able to pop over to Sandringham to do a Zoom call.
Yeah. And in Vanity Fair, a piece by Katie Nicholl noted that while Kate and William have their own videographer as part of their online team, they only have a skeleton staff at Anmer Hall, including nanny Maria Borello, who helps with home learning and meal times. How many people are in a skeleton staff? What does skeleton staff mean?
I would have thought skeleton staff would mean 3 people max, but
I thought it was like 20.
I think you're much closer to the reality. Like a videographer, like, I mean, we could have guessed that they had a nanny, but like to have all these PPOs and everyone.
I think the message is that she deserves credit because she's doing her own hair and makeup.
Yeah. Despite being exhausted, she wasn't so exhausted that she couldn't go out for what has been variously described as a stroll, a walk, or even a run, which I call bullshit on that.
No one wears this much eye makeup on a run.
Yeah. But anyway, while she was out, she stopped and she recorded a selfie video, again, for Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. According to the piece by Katie Nicholl, she was keen to be outdoors and looking as normal and natural as possible for the video. And it was very different from the other videos that we get of Kate, but I really don't know how normal it was.
It was definitely very eye-catching. Like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my god, Tom, look. Selfie. Kate, selfie.
Yeah, but I thought she came across as slightly deranged, talking in the middle of the field.
This year's Children's Mental Health Week is all about expressing yourself. That's finding creative ways in which to share your thoughts, ideas and feelings.
The piece continues with what we've become accustomed to now, which is very patronising praise of Kate. It said, sources close to the Duchess say that Kate has become more confident in front of the camera and has learned to enjoy rather than dread video calls. She has set up a DIY shoot location at Anmer Hall in Norfolk, where the Cambridges are spending the lockdown, and apparently has a special stand for her laptop and a ring light to ensure the shot is well lit.
I love that detail.
Yeah, really good.
Of course she has a fucking ring light.
Yeah. She's now basically a professional YouTuber.
Sounding 100 years old there, Tom. YouTuber. Given we're talking about YouTube. This week, the 1969 documentary Royal Family, fucking straight to the point with that name, was leaked on YouTube. This is the documentary that was dramatised in The Crown. You might remember the episode with Tobias Menzies' Prince Philip orchestrating what was sort of broadly felt to be a disastrous piece of filmmaking that the Queen reportedly banished to the BBC archives forevermore. I think 1972 was the last time it was broadcast or something like that. But this documentary was filmed over the course of a year and gives unprecedented access to the day-to-day lives of the royals, particularly the Queen. And when it originally aired, it was viewed by 30 million people. Now, the original version is 110 minutes long. The version that someone sent to us, thank you so much, by the way, for that. Somebody tweeted at us, and I believe the link is still live if you want to go looking for that. But it was 90 minutes long, so we did miss some of it.
Yeah, and like the editing got a bit chaotic at one point, so that might have been where it was taken out. But so the reason for its disappearance, it's being locked away in the BBC archives, according to royal historians like Seth Leonard, who spoke to Huffington Post recently, was that the Queen's problem with the film lies in the fact that it shows too much of the mystery of the monarchy. He said, the film brought too much attention to the lifestyle and personal life of the royal family, while not greatly emphasising the important role that the royal family carries out. If the documentary had been more concentrated on the role of the royal family and the valuable work of its members, then one suspects that it would not have met with Her Majesty's disapproval.
I'm obsessed with this detail that after it aired, David Attenborough, who at the time was a controller at the BBC, accused the filmmaker Richard Costin of killing the monarchy. What a freak! What a fucking crazy thing to say!
I know everybody loves David Attenborough and his lovely documentaries, but this is deranged behaviour.
I can't imagine somebody speaking like that now, and that's so interesting because you know that people just don't feel that strongly about the monarchy today. Yeah. Like, killing the monarchy.
With this documentary that, I mean, we watched it and we were pretty, like, pleasantly surprised. Like, I thought they were going to come across as, like, super stiff. I thought it would be either boring or, like, make me angry. But they came across pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was great. Like, it was boring, but it was so much less boring than every other documentary that we've seen about the royals. Like, a lot of listeners often recommend documentaries to us, and they are often very, very dull. Yeah. Because that's how the royals like their documentaries to be now. Mm. But I felt like with this one, it really was unprecedented, the kind of access. Like, I've never seen the Queen talk so much like that outside of prepared remarks.
And laugh so much.
And the dynamic with Philip, with her kids, with the people she works with. All that stuff was surprisingly interesting.
Yeah, now there are definitely some, like, dated bits in the film, and I don't think they would make it into a modern documentary if they were doing it now. Like, when the Queen referring to the American ambassador as a gorilla, Philip made like a joke about Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's like this description in the voiceover of Brazilians having never heard of the UK. But it had like some really amazing bits, like you're saying.
It also really cemented for me that Olivia Colman fucking nailed her performance as the Queen. Like, her voice was spot on.
Yeah, there was a bit where the Queen is like offering carrots to the horses, and like, close your eyes and it's Olivia Colman.
Yeah, or like when she's talking to her aide about the dogs at one of the official residences they go to, and the aide is saying like, oh, we should get those kind of dogs. They're even more spectacular than corgis. And she's like, oh, perhaps more spectacular, but certainly not as nice. Yeah, that just seems so good to me.
Yeah, and there were definitely some bits that were very like, all right, okay, this is England in the late 60s. I mean, probably even now they'd say this, but this line when the Queen met Richard Nixon, the narrator said, his right to office goes back to an election 4 months before. Her right to office goes back to the grandfather of Alfred the Great, who reigned around 890 AD.
Oh my god, you laughed so loud at that bit. That bit was so funny though, where they were like exchanging portraits with each other.
Yeah.
Oh my god. In general though, a lot of it was like the Queen doing a lot of paperwork, but there were some real standout moments. Like, I love the fact that the very first scene is Charles water skiing in his little briefs. This is Charles when he was like 20 years old.
It was amazing. I mean, apparently the media treatment of Charles at this time was very much like he's the action man of the family. So it makes a lot of sense that they would have him in his little pants. And they actually end the documentary with him. He's wearing more clothes, but he's fishing in a stream, like salmon fishing or something.
Looks so much like Josh O'Connor.
Yeah. But it did make me think, like, did they think the Queen was going to die a lot earlier? You know?
Yeah. My favourite, I think both of our favourite moment was this wild scene where Prince Charles and Princess Anne are being hauled between two ships on a zip line as part of, well, they say it's like naval training, but it is so funny. Oh my god.
It's like the least dignified thing you can possibly imagine. They're like sacks of potatoes being like whizzed between these two ships
for no discernible reason. Yeah. And I was just cracking up imagining if they did something like that with Kate and Will now. That would be stunning television.
That would be amazing.
You were really into the barbecue scene.
Philip was just grilling so much meat.
In a kilt, and yes, so many sausages.
And these big, like, hunks of meat. I don't even know what meat it was. It doesn't matter, because he's going to give it to you on a plate and you're going to eat it.
Oh, and then while he was doing that with Princess Anne, Charles was designated to do the salads.
With Mummy.
And you felt there was a sort of a gender politics going on there.
Yeah, I did initially think, like, oh, is this kind of like, look at Charles the Pansy making a salad with his mum? But then I thought maybe they wanted to show, like, this is Charles learning from the great stateswoman that is the Queen. And it's all in the details.
I was also very into the scene where the Queen and Prince Edward go to a shop in Scotland. Prince Edward, did they say he's like 6 in this? Or 5 or something?
I think he's 5, yeah.
And she buys him an ice cream and says, this disgusting gooey mess is going to be in the car, isn't it? I was absolutely laughing my head off imagining if Kate was given an ice cream anywhere and described it as a disgusting gooey mess. That would be so funny. Oh my god.
That was definitely one of the scenes which felt like super staged, because I just can't imagine the Queen ever going into a shop to buy something.
Taking her little coins out of her purse.
Yeah, like the purse she'd been handed like 5 minutes before they turned the cameras on.
Oh, and the other scene that was really funny was Prince Charles showing Prince Edward his cello.
Yeah.
And he's like, come look closer, these are the strings. And he keeps tightening the strings until one of them snaps in Edward's face.
I know. I thought that was like quite shocking, actually, seeing that. But what I was also surprised at, I was like, is Charles famously into cellos? Like, this is not something I've heard about him since, but he seems to know a lot about where the noise comes from in a cello.
And Prince Andrew was in it as well. He fell on his arse in the mud at the farm in that one scene.
Yeah. And I think he was like causing trouble when they were decorating the Christmas trees as well. I felt like loads of people were like, Andrew! Ooh. Little did they know.
I did find it so weird after watching it that they were so dramatically opposed to it. Like, I didn't think it was particularly unflattering. Like, as someone who doesn't believe that the royal family serve an essential purpose, I think it actually did go some way to humanising them in a way that, you know, things like the photo shoot of the heirs and Prince George stirring the Christmas pudding with everyone standing around him in their fucking formal dress. That stuff doesn't work for me at all.
Yeah.
Whereas this, even though it did feel at times staged, it was sort of weirdly realistic.
Yeah, and I think it would go down so well now because like we are so obviously used to reality TV and stuff now, in a way that probably weren't back at the time. But if I was them, I would give this a quick edit, take out some of the more like yikes lines, like the gorilla line and the Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff like that, and air it again. I think people would be obsessed with it. I think people would be really into it. There was also a really good line in it about the function of the monarchy. Because things like the courts of justice in the UK are technically the Queen's, the voiceover notes that the strength of the monarchy does not lie in the power it gives the sovereign, but in the power it denies to anyone else. Because no politician can, you know, decide to run the courts and take it over. And that was possibly the clearest argument for the office of monarch that I've heard ever.
Yeah, I loved that. I thought it was so concise and illuminating.
Yeah, absolutely. It made me think that, like, maybe this documentary is, like, bad news for people who are really into the royals and love the mystery and, like, I don't know, believe in divine right or something, but that it's actually, like, going to have a, for the royals, good effect on those who are more sceptical of the monarchy, like us, anti-monarchists.
Are you a monarchist now? This documentary has turned everything around for you.
Absolutely not, because I'm sure there are other ways to safeguard the royal courts or whatever than giving this family God knows how much money every year. But, you know, they did a better job than, like, the royals have done in recent years.
It is a real mystery how it got on YouTube, though.
Yeah. I want to know who had it, who uploaded it.
Why did they upload it? The palace was really pissed off about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if the palace hadn't been so pissed off about it, I would be, like, putting my conspiracy theory tinfoil hat on and be like, were they trying to test out something? Like, did the leak come from the palace to try and see, you know, would this be a good way of, like, humanising the royals? Is that what we need to get our popularity back up? But no, I think you're right that their, like, vehement opposition to this puts paid to that theory.
What about quote of the week, Tom?
Well, People magazine's cover story last week was all about the Queen, and the big exclusive news from it was, courtesy of a source at Sandringham, she has a big laugh.
I'm totally obsessed with this. This line. So this whole cover story was billed as what the Queen is really like behind palace walls, and the pictures are all of her in her, like, casual country garb, like the headscarf and her quilted gilet and her jumpers and all that. And Lainey Gossip pointed out that this reveal that the Queen laughs seems like something you'd say if you were trying to convince people that someone isn't a robot. Which is so accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Lainey proposes that the purpose of this story is to protect the Queen's legacy after the damage that was done by the Crown and I guess all the drama with the Sussexes as well.
and Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
But it really does just make her seem like a robot.
And it's so stupid because the film, the royal family documentary, shows her laughing loads. So if you really want people to think that you're kind of chuckling away, let them watch the bloody film.
But it was, one of the things Lady Gossip noted was, are we going to start seeing more of this really sugary coverage, particularly in American media, now that Harry and Meghan are over there? Mm-hmm. And isn't that a bit thirsty of the Queen to see this kind of stuff? Which is obviously good for us because we love all this nonsense, but it's not particularly dignified, is it, Tom?
Not at all. It's not what I expect from the Queen of the Realm. But what about our fit for a Queen?
I'm going to go with Kate this week. Kate's Zoom call with the teachers, on which she wore a blue tweed jacket by Rebecca Taylor, which she has previously worn with a matching dress or skirt or something in 2017, and I thought it looked very aging.
Yeah.
Too formal, mother of the bride type of thing. But the jacket alone I thought was nice, and it does have a little bit of sparkle to it. And when she's sitting down facing the camera, obviously you can't see this sort of fussy ruffle it has in the back, which I wasn't into. I was reading on Tom and Lorenzo's blog, and they posted the lookbook shots from Rebecca Taylor in which the model is wearing this jacket with jeans and a white t-shirt. I thought it looked so much fresher and cooler.
Yeah.
And they sort of pointed out that jeans are the best accompaniment to a jacket like this and would look so much more down to earth than the usual kind of matchy Duchess drag that Kate does. So that's how I also like to imagine that she styled the lower half of this look, although the top half was pretty prim and proper.
Yeah.
With the half up hair and the heavy makeup. So I think Kate should be first in line this week. Not just because I like to imagine she's wearing jeans, but I think she is really pulling off this relatable working mum in lockdown kind of look.
Her current persona, yeah.
People are really responding to it. I would have thought that the line about her feeling exhausted would have gotten a bit of heat.
Yeah, like widespread mockery is what I would expect.
Certainly if Meghan Markle said that she was feeling exhausted, you can imagine people would have said, oh, she's feeling exhausted in the California mansion, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. In fact, they did say those things to her, or as close to those things, when, she opened up about her feelings on the ITV documentary made over the Africa tour.
Whereas when Kate says she's feeling exhausted from the stately home she works in compared to the stately home she lives in when she's not residing in her official palace. Surrounded by staff.
Skeleton staff.
Ugh.
But is it because people love her and they don't have anything bad to say about her and they just really love hearing their own worries coming from her?
Well, Tom, I certainly see people saying stuff like that, but it is, in royal circles.
Yeah. My
larger feeling is that Kate is not making news in the same way that she regularly does.
Right.
And that pre-pandemic, something like this would have been a big headline.
Yeah.
And that the fact that it's not suggests that people aren't paying as much attention to her and that the royals in general are perhaps losing relevance.
Well, they need to get Edward and Sophie up to Scotland then, don't they? Recharge the nation's interest. But yeah, whatever the reason for it, Kate has come up on top anyway. So I guess first in line makes sense.
Next week, we are expecting to hear an update on Meghan's application for a summary judgment in her case against the publisher of the Daily Mail.
Mm-hmm.
As well as that, might we see Prince Harry on James Corden's show?
Yeah, we saw those photos of him on an open-top bus with James Corden and a load of cameras.
In Los Angeles. So I think that's a segment that James Corden often does, giving celebrities a tour of LA.
Right.
So I'm wondering, is that something that we're going to see soon? I think we've said before, or I think I've said before, that James Corden is bad vibes to
really
me.
bad vibes to me as well, yeah.
And Meghan and Harry's friendship with him is one of my least favourite things about Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, I don't need to see this Harry and James Corden on a bus, but probably will watch it if it does come out.
I'm interested in what it's for.
Yeah.
And why he's doing this. So I'm wondering if we might see that this week. Also intrigued to see if there's any more fallout from the Sophie and Edward Save the Union story.
We're going to be following that with keen eyes. But until next time, thank you so much for listening.
And have a great week. Bye.
Bye.
I only hope that you've enjoyed yourselves. Have you? Well, thanks for sounding so bloody enthusiastic.